the reason people are surprised, some people are surprised. Noam is even a supporter of the Warren Commission, which is hardly anyone supports the Warren Commission. But here's my, I mean, this is just my opinion from knowing him since I was 20. The reason he supports the Warren Commission is he really hates making politicians into deities. And I mean, he lives in Massachusetts, where, you know, that's JFK's stomping grounds. He's from Philly, but he lives in Massachusetts now 60 years. I mean, you can imagine how upset he was at JFK being deified in the 60s after he was killed. So it's reasonable to be opposed to politicians being deified. That just doesn't mean that any given piece of evidence is not true, though.
So what we have here is a University of Florida event about 2 years ago in which Noam Chomsky is challenged about the evidence for 9/11. And you'll get to hear him respond in his words.
All right. Noam, thanks for coming. You mentioned quite a few contradictions from the media and their presentation on things. And I think the most notorious case of this is with September 11, 2001. You mentioned in a forum on ZNet in 2006 that you wanted to see a consensus of engineers and specialists that understand the actual structures of these buildings and their possible collapse. And there is such a group, and I'm here to tell you about that and ask you a follow-up question. It's called Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. There's a consensus of over 2,000 of them. All right, is this a question? Please don't interrupt. I'm asking a question. I'm setting it up. Thank you. This consensus shows that Building 7, the third building that fell on 9/11, fell in free fall speed, as this report acknowledges. They're ready to come forward and jump on board with 9/11. I know you've mentioned it's a distraction, but there's no better case of the media covering up things than not presenting Building 7, that third building. We've all seen the other towers fall, but what about Building 7, no?
Well, in fact, you're right that there's a consensus among a minuscule number of architects and engineers, tiny number, a couple of them are perfectly serious. They're not doing what scientists and engineers do when they think they've discovered something. What you do, when you think you've discovered something, what you do is write articles in scientific journals, give talks at the professional societies, go to the civil engineering department at MIT or Florida or wherever you are, and present your results, and then proceed to try to convince the national academies, the professional society of physicists and civil engineers, the departments in the major universities, convince them that you've discovered something. Now, there happen to be a lot of people around who spent an hour on the internet and think they know a lot of physics, but it doesn't work like that. There's a reason why there are, there's a reason, may I finish? There's a reason why there are graduate schools in these departments and research. So the thing to do is pretty straightforward. Do what scientists and engineers do who think they've made a discovery. Now, when this is brought up, as it has been, there are one or two minor articles, like this one article that appeared in an online journal which claims to have found, or someone claims to have found, traces of nanothermite in Building 7. I don't know what that means. You don't know what that means. But if it means anything, bring it to the attention of the scientific community. That's a couple of other fragments like that. So yes, there's a small group of people who believe this, and there's a straightforward way to proceed. Now, when this is brought up, there's a standard reaction. Scientists and engineers and professional societies and physicists are so intimidated by the government that they're afraid to they don't have the courage to take this position. Anyone who has any record of any familiarity with political activism knows that this is one of the safest things you can do. It's almost riskless. People take risks far beyond this constantly. including scientists and engineers. I could have run through and can run through many examples. I mean, maybe people will laugh at you, but that's about it. It's an almost riskless position. So that can't be the reason why nobody's convinced. However, there's a much more deeper issue, which has been brought up repeatedly, and I have yet to hear a response to it. There happens to be, whatever one thinks about Building 7, I have no opinion. I don't know as much science and engineering as the people who believe that they have an answer to this. So I'm willing to let the professional societies determine it if they get the information. So whatever the facts, but there's just overwhelming evidence that the Bush administration wasn't involved. Very elementary evidence. You don't have to be a physicist to understand it. You just have to think for a minute. Okay? So let's think for a minute. There's a couple of facts which are uncontroversial, right? One fact that is uncontroversial is that the Bush administration desperately wanted to invade Iraq. That's a long-standing goal. There's good reasons for it. The second largest energy resources in the world, right in the middle of the world's major energy-producing region, perfectly obvious reasons, which they effectively are stated, but they were obvious anyway. So they wanted to invade Iraq. One uncontroversial fact. Second uncontroversial fact. They didn't blame the 9/11 on Iraqis. They blamed it on Saudis, mainly. That's their major ally. So they blamed it on people from their major ally, not on the country that they wanted to invade. Third uncontroversial fact. Unless they're total lunatics, they would have blamed it on Iraqis if they were involved in any way. That would have given them open season on invading Iraq. Total support, international support, the UN resolution. No need to concoct wild stories about the weapons of mass destruction and the contacts between Saddam and Al-Qaeda, which of course quickly exploded, discrediting them. And no reason to invade Afghanistan, which was a waste of time for them. But they didn't. Well, the conclusion is pretty straightforward. Either they are total lunatics, or they weren't involved, and they're not total lunatics. So whatever you think about Building 7, there are other considerations to be concerned with.
All right, I think our speaker
I'm going to
answering
give
that question
my full
succinctly,
response
so let's see.
because I gave some response last year, and you should go watch it. But I do have a couple of things that you need to say. My friend Dr. Tim Eastman is a PhD in physics who just retired from NASA. Had sent Noam his physics paper before Noam said this at Florida, where he reviewed 83 different peer-reviewed articles about the fall of the towers. And of the 15 that dealt with World Trade Center 7, only one favored the official story. All the others expose it as ridiculous. And the one who favored the official story were just people from NIST who pulled something together. You know, the NIST reports are not peer-reviewed, and they're supposed to be. As far as the Saudis, Bush saying the Saudis did, I mean, I don't know why we're trying to get the 28 pages released now, which, you know, suggests that. I mean, the real problem, see, Noam is actually, it's very good. He never criticizes the public, which is good. But the reality is the American public doesn't know the difference between Saudis and Iraqis. They're all Arab Muslims, and that has to be faced. I'm sorry, so sorry to say. In addition, it's really not, Noam used to, during the Vietnam War, criticize the so-called foreign policy establishment experts who said, well, we should decide this, not the public. They don't know enough. And he would defend the right of the average person to have a say in their foreign policy. But here he's saying, you have a high school degree and you actually took science in high school? All irrelevant. You don't have a right to weigh in on this. This is high school level science. I mean, the two other major public issues which deal with science are evolution and climate change. Those are graduate school level discussions. but this is high school level. This book deals with David Ray Griffin, 25 Contradictions, shows that obviously one or another thing that the government or corporate media said is a lie. And Noam used to say, my favorite quote from Noam is from American Power, the New Mandarins. The responsibility of intellectuals is to speak the truth and expose lies. Why aren't these lies worth exposing? I mean, Howard Zinn, in the interview I did with him, you can look up Howard Zinn, David Schlesinger on the internet, and the video's not there, but the transcript is. And Howard says, well, 9/11 is a distraction. Noam says that too. A lot of people say that. Doesn't that mean that it's okay for the government to lie about some things and not other things? That's what it means to me. Who says that's unfair for me to say that? Okay, very good. You're good, man. Okay. Now, Islamophobia. All progressives, liberal or radical, try to be anti-racist. Some whites are better at it than others, but everybody knows that they're supposed to try to be anti-racist. The discussion of the evidence would make life better for Muslims in this country and back in their originating countries. And so it's an outrage that there is no discussion. Jennings.
So what we have here is a clip of Barry Jennings. Barry Jennings was in Building 7, and he'll tell his story.
When we got to the 8th floor, I started walking to one side of the building. That side of the building was gone. The first explosion I heard when I was on the stairwell landing, when we made it down to the 6th floor. Then we made it back to the 8th floor, I heard some more explosions.
What's the sound?
Like a boom. Like an explosion.
More than one.
Yes.
I started walking down the stairs right to the 8th floor. Big explosion. Goes back into the 8th floor.
When we get outside, the police officer comes to me and says, you have to run. We have more information of bombs, so you have to run. When we got to the 8th floor, I started walking to one side.
You've already seen that.
Yeah. Now, Barry Jennings had achieved the rank, the position of Deputy Director for Emergency Planning for the Housing Department for the City of New York. He started as the person who shoveled coal into the boilers, but he made his way up.
Was he on the tower or he was on the 7th?
Seven. And the reason why his story is important and why David Ray Griffin cites him extensively in his book on World Trade Center 7 is that he was there too early for the explosions he heard, the damage he saw to have come from debris falling on 7 from the North Tower. And his story is the best human interest story that proves the smoking gun. I have a website, JenningsMystery.com, and I'm very interested in having people help us go out in banner on August 19th. We did this in 2009, and we haven't done it since, but I'd like to do it again this year at either newspapers or TV stations or radio stations or schools of journalism. The idea of studying journalism now, incredible. But so you can be in touch with me through that website. And I forgot to mention, I have a website, challengingchomsky.org, and I very much need people to reach out to me to help with that. It's going to be a long process. I just saw him twice this year already. Who here can help on either Chomsky or Barry Jennings? Just raise your hand so I can try to connect with you. Okay. Jennings died 2 days before the final draft of the report on World Trade Center 7. He's Muslim, and we don't know his mosque. And he's, we don't know what hospital he died in. Everybody I've ever sent to look into him has not come back to talk to me. The professional private investigator who was hired to look into him returned the money and told Dylan Avery, don't ever contact me again. And one of the things really important about Jennings, I didn't even know last year, the fellow who saved him, the firefighter who's standing with him in that interview on the street, there were several dozen firefighters who were sent into World Trade Center 7 to see whether or not they could put the fires out. And and the leadership changed, and they were told, don't put the fires out. But there are New York City firefighters, maybe retired, who can testify about how bad the damage was in 7, and we need to find those folks. So I need people to help me with that.
Say that Jennings website again.
JenningsMystery.com. Socialist realism. I'm asserting that left gatekeeperism, the suppression and discussion of 9/11 truth by leftists, is the new version of socialist realism, which was something of the old left in the Soviet Union. How many people know what socialist realism is? Socialist realism was the way that Stalin tried to prevent artists from saying whatever they wanted. He wanted to make sure that any art that came forward only had the right lessons. And you can't treat artists like that. It's absurd. And it was obvious to the new left that it was ridiculously dogmatic. Well, left gatekeeperism is the new socialist realism, ridiculously dogmatic. Sort of like in Alice in Wonderland. The Queen has the verdict before the evidence. One last thing. I was just in Atlanta. I went. Cynthia McKinney had made a presentation in New Jersey about the fact that the King family went to Memphis in '99 and got a civil verdict with a $1 settlement that the U.S. government killed Martin, not James Earl Ray. And how many people knew that?
Oh, yeah.
Good. Well, the King Center in Atlanta doesn't say that. That's terrible. So, I mean, I can't imagine that the family wouldn't correct it if we could get to the family. So, I also want to talk to people about what can be done on that front.
The transcripts are on their website.
Yes, I know, but people don't necessarily go to their website. They go to see, if they go to Atlanta, they might go to the King Center. And so, anyway, hopefully that will be easy to solve. I appreciate your patience.
So thank you, David. We'd like to have the last 15 minutes or so for some Q&A discussions. Gentleman over here.
Yeah, I have two questions. So it's been 14 years since the 9/11 scat. From what you see statistically, is awareness increasing, either domestically or internationally, and in what areas, and to what extent? And secondly, what's the prospect for progress in the courts, either on the Saudi complicity issue or in other issues, other aspects?
So I'll address the
question.
The question was, first of all, is the awareness growing, and how, and what are the issues associated with that? And then what's the likelihood of proceeding through the courts? I can only talk about anecdotally. When I started doing 9/11 truth outreach about 6 years ago, getting the finger was a usual hazard of doing 9/11 truth outreach. In the years since then, the receptivity to 9/11 truth has gotten to the point where you never get the finger unless you're online. That's kind of because there are people out there, I am convinced, whose job it is to make you feel bad, right?
Wade Manson said the NSA has 1,000 people paid to do that.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me at all. But the rank and file, the people out there are either unaware or they're receptive, and very few are, and some just don't want to know. Mm-hmm. In 2013, architects and engineers did a survey for their rethink, and I think I wish they would have included this question in or this part of it in this detail in other surveys that they've done. They asked would you agree or disagree with, or agree with the phrase explosives were used to destroy the Twin Towers? If you were age 55 and above, there's a 10% chance that you would agree with that statement. And then each of the other age groups got progressively higher. And by the time you were in the 18 to 25 age range, your likelihood of agreeing with that was 24%. So what that suggests to me is there's a demographic problem that the people trying to keep the lid on 9/11 are facing, and that is the people who lived through it, were duped, are reluctant to change, but but the next generation behind them is saying, what? So they're saying, what? That can't be true. And also there's a rebellion against the parents, I suppose, aspect.
How much of that could be, though, just a misinterpretation of what happened on 9/11? Thinking planes crashing, that means explosives. Yeah, the fuel was an explosive. You know, it's not very clear, that question.
Well, to me, you can go and do further research around that question, because I think the demographics are really against the official story. In response to the question about the courts, it is unlikely that the courts are going to be able to do anything. As you know, the insurance settlements related to Building 7 and the Twin Towers have gone ahead, and billions of dollars have been given out in compensation to Silverstein Properties and I think others. Even though the issues are really clear that the buildings were destroyed by controlled demolition, none of that has, none of the proponents or none of the defendants, the insurance companies who don't want to pay, have ever raised anything except maybe diesel fires were the cause. Illegal and hazardous diesel fires, which this rules out. So I don't expect that there's going to be any chance that the legal system is going to let anything in.
What about
Excuse me, wait.
It's expensive.
There is court action actually
from the Saudi angle?
happening in Florida due to a FOIA request. 80,000 documents which the FBI lied about, saying that they had no information. Due to this FOIA request and a very brave judge in Florida demanding that the FBI divulge these documents, it's now happening. He's reviewing 4,000 at a time as we speak. To follow this information, go to floridabulldog.com. Click on the link to 9/11.
Was this related to the destruction of information prior to 9/11? The FBI programs that were tracking the hijackers?
All of that, and also about a Sarasota couple with several of the alleged hijackers were in connection with, and much more.
If anybody wants to work on a legal issue, there is a legal team, and you don't have to be a lawyer. You could join it. They have meetings Sunday night by conference call. My friend David Cole is very active on FOIA stuff. Anybody who likes this stuff, I will put you in touch with David Cole, and you can help him with his FOIA efforts.
Yes, sir, Matt?
You said a lot about what's obvious is that a lot of people on the left are denying the reality of 9/11. But you didn't really address why you think that is. It's obvious with people like Amy Goodman and a lot of the magazines, like the Progressive and Mother Jones, that they're funded by the Ford Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation. They don't want to lose their funding. But why do you think Noam Chomsky? I mean, the guy's smart, but the minute he starts talking about 9/11, he becomes a babbling, makes very general, broad
It's
statements.
just because, in my opinion, it's just furtherance of his support of the Warren Commission. He's just used to criticizing so-called conspiracy theorists, even though he has the sense not to use that term as a put down. Noam's not the best example. People like David Swanson, right? Noam he doesn't need money, and he doesn't need more respect. He doesn't need, in the end, But David Swanson's only 40, and he's really brilliant, and he's actually made some improvements. But in general, I think the reason why the left is they're just dogmatic. Any ideological person it's possible for them to fall into dogmatism. And in this case, they like the idea of blowback. They like the idea that the Arabs fought back. Now, like the idea too, it's just not true in this case. So that's part of it. Also, the problem of the left needing to talk about structural reasons why things happen. For instance, at the UNAC conference, one of the people who was speaking against us made the argument, well, the issue of War and Peace should not be resolved on the basis of some, how a building came down. But that's not the point. The issue is the government lying? And we need to be concerned about all government lies.
So, so I want to add one little point about the Noam Chomsky piece. I found it astonishing that he says that they should have had the Iraqis be the pilots for these planes, when in fact, I believe all the Iraqis were heavily surveilled, and the Saudis probably weren't, and the people from Yemen, or the alleged hijackers would have been, but this Iraqis, everyone would have known where they were and what they were doing, and he neglects the fact that by including all these other places, they're able to expand their global reach. So it's incomprehensible to me when he says these things. And as you said, he turns into a babbling idiot when he does it. So there's a gentleman in the back.
Yes.
One more.
Brother.
Just say
No, the fellow behind you.
I am the sort of person you're talking about. I'm a person on the left. I listen to Democracy Now! And Noam Chomsky, and I have never subscribed to the theory of controlled demolition or anything. The planes crashing into the buildings did happen. There's no way you can deny that. The question is, why would there be other explosives and so forth? In this particular discussion, my concern is that Islamophobia, which I don't like the term, but anti-Islamic bigotry and reasoning with people like Bill Maher, which is, goes awry on the issue, is something that progressives need to unite around and have to sort of develop, in some instances, like distinguishing between Ayaan Hirsi Ali and Bill Maher's position. He praises her on the show. And bringing this issue in seems to sort of divide progressives. Very sharply. If the notion is, in order to be against anti-Islamic bigotry, you have to embrace controlled demolition theory, that would tend to weaken it. A very good friend of mine was receptive to this theory, and he was talking about how the idea of finger pointing, the idea that the Israelis were involved in it. That's a lot of people talk about that possibility. But you see, there's a long list of things that Israel did and has done that are documented at the yin yang. You throw in one thing that seems dubious, and they all focus on that and not about, the things that we know, the bombing of the UN sites during the war, repeatedly, and so on. And it's totally documented.
Murray, I want to, before you begin, the first thing I want to say is, you have to remember that the planes hit, the fires were there, and the fires continued for an hour in the South Building with no visible signs of deformation for an hour. And then instantly the South Tower came down. In the North Tower, it stood there, smoking, no signs of visible deformation. And then all of a sudden, it comes down.
Hour and a half later.
Hour and a half later. So, the planes were there, the fires were there, the building stood, but nothing happened, and then it was destroyed. So, if you are one of those people who the only time you've ever seen the buildings being destroyed is the media shots that show the plane hitting and the buildings coming down, all within a 30-second clip, you see both of them coming, planes hitting the right. If that's the only thing you ever see, you think the planes knocked the buildings down, and the hour and a half in between is completely obliterated by the media. So it is incontroversial that the buildings were destroyed with some other means. It wasn't the planes, and it wasn't the fire.